It had been over midnight. I got out of bed to get some water after hours of restless tossing and turning. The living room's lights remained turned on. That was the night, I'm afraid. Paul came to visit me for a bit because my brother Casey sent him. I was heartbroken to hear about what had happened to him. His world came crashing down when he found out his wife had cheated on him. Paul had been caught completely unawares, despite being married to the same woman for many years. Even though Casey was going through a tough time, he was unable to cope with it. "Please, Jessica, take him in," Casey pleaded with me. "He craves tranquility." Although I was unaware of Paul's background, I was aware that a woman's treachery was the root cause of his terrible situation. Our family had already experienced a great deal of loss. 7 years ago, my husband Jacob passed away. He passed away from a heart attack when I was 60 years old. Our dream house was taking shape just moments ago. The original deadline was 1 year from now, and then suddenly nothing happened. My entire world turned upside down when Jacob passed away. Because of the alone I experienced, I have carried a sense of loss within me for many years. However, the isolation has been more severe as of late. That night was just like those others. Are you prepared? Reason being, this isn't your run-of-the-mill narrative. The lines become hazy, the emotions get out of hand, and a confession is lurking beneath the surface, ready to be revealed. In the midst of this, you may experience feelings you weren't aware you had or discover limits you didn't know existed. If you've been hoping to hear a story like this, then you should definitely subscribe and enable notifications. I am incredibly grateful for your support. I approached the living room with caution. As I made my way inside, I noticed Paul seated in front of the TV, engrossed in a romantic comedy. I was completely focused on ensuring that Paul had some solace during his stay here at that moment. But I was naive. Reality had different intentions all along. Everything was spiraling out of control, and it would take a single action to set things straight. "Did I rouse you?" Paul inquired as he shifted his gaze to me. His voice exhibited a combination of unease and an intense desire for tranquility. It made no difference that I was standing there in my pajamas. Until that moment, I had never felt so alone. I smiled gently and told him no. I merely decided to come have a glass of water. Because I was so lonely at the time, I really didn't want it to end. Perhaps the night would feel less lonely if I spent some time with Paul. If only we could find a way to relax and enjoy a movie together, it would give me a sense that things weren't completely out of control. Paul gestured to the vacant seat on the couch adjacent to him and invited everyone to come sit and watch it with him. Choosing wasn't difficult. I wished there was something meaningful, anything to make me feel warm as I slept. Therefore, I took a seat beside him. I was unable to concentrate on the scenes even after the movie began. Something was going on inside of me and I wasn't sure what it was. Everything felt different because of Paul, the stranger sitting next to me, the subtle uneasiness in his voice, etc. My gaze briefly strayed from the television as the movie's love sequences unfolded. As the on-screen pair grew closer to one another, it brought up memories of things I had believed I had forgotten. Subsequently, I inadvertently tilted my head to the side and softly touched Paul's arm. I swiftly retreated. Apologies, but my words were rushed and my panicked gaze drooped. It was my mistake. Paul remained silent for an instant before responding with a subtle nod and the words, "It's okay, don't be concerned." The distance between us seemed to shrink, though, at that same instant. Although the film continued to play, the atmosphere had changed. It was at that point that Paul and I were unable to achieve true serenity. It seemed like the emptiness within each of us was constantly getting in the way, even though we were seated so close. That was the beginning of something more intricate than I had anticipated, and I would always remember that night. Everything seemed to be about to change at that particular second. Odd things had begun to happen that night. I felt an overwhelming attraction to Paul as we sat on the couch and watched a romantic comedy. After spending so much time alone, I felt an uncomfortable tension rising, even though I was only wearing my nightgown. Sitting so close to another man made it even worse. Being around Paul didn't make things better. My perspective was shifting as a result. Maybe it was the years of solitude that got under my skin, but being this close to another man again sparked something. Something was certainly going on with Paul, and I couldn't put my finger on it. It was strange and perplexing. Everything began to fall into place that night. I didn't let myself unwind for a single second until the film concluded. Upon its conclusion, I rose from my seat, made my way to my room, and spent some time sitting on my bed. I had to give some thought, but what? Up until now, I was completely unaware. It was like pressing the reset button on my emotions when I tried to sleep with them all swirling about. During the night, I did nothing but toss and turn. I was dragged into the morning by the lack of sleep. As soon as the sun came up, I sat down at the piano in the hopes of calming my nerves. I woke up every morning hoping that everything were still normal, even though I had been living alone for nearly 7 years. I felt at ease and reminded of Jacob whenever I played the piano, as if it were an old friend. I prayed that this morning would also bring me some relief as my fingers fluttered across the keyboard. Outside, I then perceived a noise. I was completely oblivious to the shadowy figure that materialized in front of the house at first, but as soon as the music started to play, he unlocked the front door and stepped inside. I continued playing, oblivious to his presence, until I abruptly noticed his silent observation of me. A moment of paralysis passed through my fingers, and that knot in my stomach? Indeed, it returned with a vengeance, more powerful than before. As if nothing were amiss, Paul simply grinned at me. Thank you, he thought it was lovely. I don't think I've ever gotten a better birthday present than that. I experienced a brief surge of enthusiasm. The moment Paul entered the room, it was as if we had entered a whole new world. Then, in a tone that was completely new to me, he said something while remaining calm and sincere. My previous statement? I agree. Observing you, even for a few moments, was the most delightful experience I've had recently, and did you realize that? I celebrated my 40th birthday today. It didn't take long for me to notice how deeply their words moved me. Attempting to calm the whirlwind of emotions, I looked away as he sweetly complimented me. Suddenly, after all these years, I felt less alone, and I could tell that things were beginning to shift. Learning that it was Paul's 40th birthday made me want to do anything, to make the day feel ordinary, even extraordinary. After the excitement of that morning, I was looking forward to the evening. I looked to him as a sudden inspiration struck. Isn't it the day of your birthday? I inquired. Then I say, let us rejoice. Shall we celebrate tonight with a glass of wine and a slice of cake? Paul smiled at me as if he were taken aback. He remarked, well, if you're suggesting it, I guess tonight might actually turn out to be fun, his eyes sparkling with playfulness. Next, he said with a mischievous smile, but there's a catch, following a little pause. I really need you to play the piano again. Defeating it is impossible. I attempted to alleviate some of the anxiety that was growing up inside of me by laughing. I was all for it, but I insisted on a proper toast and a fine bottle of wine before we proceeded. Unbeknownst to me, even that little conversation had a profound effect on me. I told myself that this was only about maintaining a sense of normalcy for the night, so I pushed away the feelings that were boiling up. It was only a birthday party, nothing more. Nothing more. But then Paul said something that was so nonchalant but shocking that it caught me off guard. He inquired, how old are you? While maintaining that same innocent expression on his face. About 45? And then I was paralyzed. I was taken aback by the sincerity of the comment because I had always strived to appear younger than my actual age. I felt compelled to grin. I tried to brush it off by saying, oh, not quite. But I couldn't help but feel a little giddy from the excitement he inspired. On the inside, I was torn between the passionate embrace he was giving me and the whirlwind of feelings I was attempting to contain. Paul and I had been drinking wine all day, and were ready to celebrate when nightfall arrived. We were drawing nearer as we conversed. I felt comfortable with him because of his kindness and attentiveness. A pull was connecting us, and it was getting stronger by the second. Some voice within me kept telling me that this was just another night like any other. However, Paul smiled, lifted his glass, and inquired in a light-hearted manner, his eyes still full of life, when would you play a song for me? Getting out of it is obviously not an option for you. I paused for a second. After that, I sighed and decided, okay, let's do it. I sat down at the piano and attempted to soothe the tempest within by allowing the music to flow freely once more. Something changed with each chord, though. I felt pulled nearer to him even as I grew engrossed in the music. The way he listened and showed his appreciation made me feel better, as if it were his top priority. My original plan for a low-key party took a whole different turn. In that instant, I felt a surge of emotion, something genuine, something I hadn't experienced in a long time. As my fingertips caressed the keys, my vision became hazy. I felt something with every note, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It seemed as if my heart and my mind were gradually drifting apart as Paul's voice barely resonated in my thoughts. I had no idea when to end because I was completely absorbed in it. As soon as Paul materialized at my side, my fingers began an innate hunt for a different tune. He delicately ran his palms over mine. His voice was gentle and somewhat trembling as he spoke to you about how wonderful you are, and how gorgeous you are as a pianist. There was an odd void left as his words resounded in my mind. His gentle touch, even as my emotions whirled about, had a way of bringing me back down to earth. "Come on, you're exhausted," he spoke in a soothing and encouraging tone. "Indulge in a little couch time. You're in for a pleasant surprise." I was led to the couch by Paul's tender touch. Although I was still confused by what was happening, I did feel a great sense of significance in that instant. My mind was still racing when I took a seat. After that, Paul made his way back to the piano. His deft touch on the piano keys astounded me, and then all of a sudden he began playing my favorite tune. Instantly I knew it. It was the song that had captivated me for so long, the one that could never fail to touch my soul. I felt my heart racing as he played. Memories that I wasn't prepared to confront resurfaced with each note. As I listened, I did nothing more. I felt a spark flare within me as the music resounded throughout the room. I became unable to sit still after a time. He seemed to be beckoning me with the song he played. In an effort to steady the turbulence in my chest, I strode slowly toward him. Standing next to him, I was at a loss for what to do as I approached. "You're really good at this," I said, my voice quivering as I attempted to conceal the rapid rhythm of my heartbeat. "My favorite tune is being played by you." As my emotions fought with each other, my words reverberated throughout the room. "Hey Paul, who are you?" With my voice barely audible, I whispered the question. It's really starting to annoy me. This is all new to me. Every emotion imaginable washed over me. Joy, fear, confusion, excitement, and overwhelmed. We drew near enough for me to feel his breath as our gazes locked. As I locked eyes with him, a whole new universe opened up before me. Time came to a halt with that. His gaze both accelerated my heart rate and comforted me. At that same second, it seemed as though there were no other humans on Earth. A new light illuminated every detail. There was a sudden sensation that everything had shrunk down to a mere two of us. Suddenly, a new light shone through, and all the other details vanished. When I met his gaze for an instant, everything else faded away. Paul and I were the only ones left when all the chaos, anxiety, and racing thoughts faded away. His grip on my waist was just the right amount of firm to keep me from flopping around, yet not so tight that he pushed. I couldn't put my finger on it, the overwhelming emotions or the wine, but my mind was racing. If Paul hadn't been there to steady me, I doubt I would still be standing. I felt grounded in the midst of the mayhem because of his warmth and the security I felt by his side, and the intensity of his gaze drew me closer to him. He whispered something along the lines of "You need to rest," as he led me to the sofa. Although his words were soothing, I felt both comforted and unsettled by the sensation of his hands on my waist. Our gazes met once again as I took a seat, and his hands remained in that spot for an additional second. Neither my emotions nor my words were prepared. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the night was changed forever by the gentle caress of his touch. I will never forget that couch night. It was the most exciting and wonderful experience of my life. There was barely enough time for me to digest anything before sunrise because everything happened so fast. I stood up and made my way to the living room as soon as I opened my eyes. Coming in from the kitchen, the aroma of coffee roused me from my slumber. Paul stood shirtless in the kitchen brewing coffee. His muscular physique, which had been resting all night, was on full exhibit. Where do I stand? So I felt this weird tingle all over as I thought about last night. There was still a jumble of my underwear and nightgown on the floor. I was anxious and exhilarated all over again just thinking about it. I was even more bewildered after mentally reliving the events of the night. At this point, what was to happen? How am I supposed to even start making sense of that? But it was obvious of one thing. We shared an intimacy I'd never experienced before. Something that might alter the course of my life irrevocably began this evening. Paul glanced over from the kitchen and fixed me a warm grin and gentle eyes. There was a heavy air of unspoken words in the stillness that enveloped us. I attempted to make sense of my emotions and the situation as I stood there observing him. The situation was chaotic. Moving ahead, I was at a loss as to what to do. I felt totally absorbed, as if I had become a spectator. On the other hand, I sensed a change and knew there was no turning back. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, including joy and confusion, as I stood there as Jessica. Nothing has made sense to me since yesterday night. In a flash, everything had transpired. I shook my head slightly and closed my eyes for a moment as I looked at my clothing that were still on the floor. Because of how convoluted everything was, I had no idea what to think or feel. I got to my feet and hurriedly made my way to the restroom. I needed to escape the emotional tornado that was engulfing me by taking a shower and getting some fresh air. My underwear and nightgown were undisturbed. The chaos didn't bother me. If only for a moment, I could have submerged myself in the hot water and escaped the mayhem around me. I dried off in the shower and then bundled myself in a towel. The door swung open out of nowhere. Paul remained steadfast. I went completely still. Neither of us shifted for a second. The world seemed to come to a halt as our eyes met and remained locked in an intense stare. I was at a loss for what to do. My expressions of bewilderment and anguish must have been plain to see because I felt totally exposed and vulnerable. Still, the words kept bubbling up and overflowing out of me no matter what I did. As my voice quivered slightly, I confess that I am completely confused about everything happening. How we are operating. I feel as if I'm dreaming, even though I know it's completely incorrect. Paul moved closer to me still one more step. There were a lot of mixed feelings in his eyes. What was going to happen next was anybody's guess. The words wouldn't come out of my mouth at that very time, even though I wanted to say something. With a somewhat trembling voice, Paul announced that your coffee was done. Everything was so chaotic and gorgeous in its own peculiar way as my gaze shifted to him. I failed to consider what lay ahead. I sunk into that instant. Seated with Paul, our eyes meeting as we recalled what transpired between us, the disarray in my heart continued to spin as I sipped my coffee. I was utterly bewildered by the rate at which it had all transpired. So what did we do? Remember how we felt. To try to make sense of it all, I wanted to say something, but I couldn't find the perfect words. Paul began, Jesus. His voice labored. It was a huge mistake on our part. That is something I am aware of. How could we have allowed this to transpire? There was comprehension and guilt in his eyes. Like me, he realized that things had gotten out of hand. I mean, we should feel remorse over this, right? It was the wrong thing to do. A pause ensued. I managed to untangle my thoughts and find my voice. Well, perhaps. It was all wrong and it occurred so quickly. Looking back, it seems like we let things to get too convoluted, and now it all simply doesn't make sense. I stated that it was a bad decision for us both. Admitting that we had both crossed a line was a burden on my heart, but it also brought a peculiar sense of comfort. Paul stared silently at the floor for a while before raising his eyes to meet mine. He spoke to Jessica in a steady but gentle tone, suggesting that they act as if nothing had transpired. It would be best if we could put this behind us, for the good of both of us. Considering how chaotic things are, what benefit would there be in continuing to drag this out? Separation is necessary for us. I felt a cord go out in my chest when he said it. It was true what he said. Holding on to this would be detrimental to us both. Yes, I responded, inhaling deeply. Perhaps this is a good thing. Perhaps the solution lies in your departure. Under his breath, Paul nodded, his face a mask of determination. He knew it was the best option for our health. He stated that he needed to do this. We're both doing the right thing by doing this. For a little moment, we did nothing more than stare at one another. Acknowledging that our actions in those gloomy times were simply mistakes, we both came to appreciate the significance of this decision at that very moment. Maybe getting to the bottom of it might be the hardest part of making things right. The only way ahead, it seemed, was to stop bringing each other down in such a knotted fashion and start letting each other go. I pray my tale was entertaining to you. I am genuinely delighted that I have been able to share this thrilling experience with you. Remember to subscribe if you would like to hear more stories similar to this. If you want to know when a new episode is available, turn on alerts. I really appreciate your feedback in the form of likes and comments. I am truly inspired when I hear your sentiments and ideas. Your encouragement motivates me to create even more. With that, I will leave you and see you in the next story. Thank you so much.